The rain hammered against the windshield as Sarah Mitchell pulled into the gravel parking lot of the Rusty Anchor, a roadside diner just outside Bakersfield, California. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel, not from the cold November night, but from the words that still echoed in her mind like shattered glass. No kids means no future. That's what Marcus had said 3 hours ago, standing in their bedroom doorway with his suitcase already packed. 5 years of marriage reduced to a single diagnosis, a single choice. She'd come home from the fertility clinic with tears streaming down her face, and instead of holding her, he'd handed her divorce papers his lawyer had apparently prepared weeks ago. "You're broken, Sarah. I can't build a life with someone who's broken." She was 32 years old, a middle school art teacher with paint perpetually under her fingernails and hope that used to live in her chest, where now there was only a hollow ache. The diner's neon sign flickered through the rain, casting red and blue shadows across her face. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. She hadn't slept. She just drove, trying to outrun the shame that clung to her like smoke. Inside the Rusty Anchor, the smell of coffee and bacon grease wrapped around her like a worn blanket. It was nearly midnight, and the place was almost empty except for a trucker hunched over the counter and a group of leather-clad bikers occupying the corner booth. Their jackets bore patches and symbols she didn't recognize, and their laughter was loud, rough-edged, filling the space with a kind of dangerous energy. Sarah slid into a booth as far from them as possible, her eyes fixed on the laminated menu she wasn't really reading. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a bun, approached with a pot of coffee. "What can I get you, honey?" Sarah's voice came out smaller than she intended. "Just coffee, please, and maybe some toast." The waitress, whose name tag read Betty, studied her for a moment too long. "You look like you've been through hell and back." "Something like that," Sarah whispered, and the tears came before she could stop them. Right there in the booth under the fluorescent lights, she broke. Her shoulders shook, and she pressed her palms against her eyes, mortified but unable to hold it in anymore. Betty set down the coffee pot and slid into the booth across from her without asking. "Talk to me, sweetheart. What's his name? How did you know?" Betty smiled sadly. 40 years working in diners, you learn to read heartbreak. "So what did he do?" Sarah's words tumbled out between sobs. "He left. Today. Because I can't have children. The doctors said it's not impossible but unlikely, and he said I was broken. That I wasn't worth building a future with." Betty's expression hardened. "That man's a fool and a coward." From the corner booth, one of the bikers, a massive man with a gray beard and arms covered in tattoos, turned his head. His eyes, surprisingly gentle for someone so intimidating, met Sarah's. The other bikers had gone quiet too, and Sarah realized with horror that they'd heard everything. The bearded man stood up, his leather vest creaking, and walked over. Sarah's heart hammered. She'd heard stories about biker gangs, about violence and territory and things that happened to people who caught their attention. He stopped beside the booth, towering over them both, his patch Red Reaper. Below it, another patch, Hell's Angels Bakersfield chapter. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a low rumble like distant thunder. "I couldn't help but overhear. And I gotta tell you something." Sarah nodded, unable to speak. "My wife and I, we tried for kids for 12 years. 12 years of heartbreak, of treatments, of hope dying a little more each month. And you know what? Those were some of the best years of my life because I had her. Eventually we adopted 2 beautiful kids, and they're grown now with families of their own. But even if we'd never had kids, even if it had just been the 2 of us until the end, she would have been enough. She's always been enough." He pulled out a chair and sat down, and the other bikers migrated over too, forming a protective circle around the booth. There was Tiny, who wasn't tiny at all, with scars across his knuckles and a surprisingly warm smile. There was Maria, the only woman in the group, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that had seen too much. And there was Jax, younger than the others, with a baby face that contradicted the hard set of his jaw. "That man who left you," Reaper continued, "he didn't deserve you in the first place. You're not broken. You hear me? You're not broken." Sarah returned to her empty apartment 3 days later, and the silence felt like suffocation. Marcus had taken everything that mattered. The leather couch they'd bought together, the coffee maker, even the photographs from their honeymoon in Maui. What he'd left behind were the things that reminded her of her failure. The stack of fertility clinic brochures on the kitchen counter, the ovulation tracker app still open on her iPad, the baby name book she'd hidden in her nightstand. At Roosevelt Middle School, the whispers started immediately. Small towns don't keep secrets, and Bakersfield was small enough that everyone knew Marcus had moved in with Jennifer Holbrook, a 24-year-old dental hygienist with perfect teeth and, presumably, perfect ovaries. Sarah heard the teachers talking in the faculty lounge when they thought she couldn't hear. Poor thing, she must be devastated. Well, you can't really blame him, can you? A man wants children. That's just biology. Even worse were the students. Seventh graders could be cruel with the thoughtless honesty of children who hadn't yet learned to hide their judgments. Ms. Mitchell, is it true Mr. Mitchell left you? My mom said you can't have babies. Is that why you're always alone now? She'd locked herself in the art supply closet and cried into a box of construction paper, the smell of tempera paint mixing with her tears. The real humiliation came on a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks after Marcus left. Sarah was at the grocery store, standing in the cereal aisle, when she saw them, Marcus and Jennifer, his hand resting protectively on the small of her back, her laughter bright and careless. And there, in Jennifer's shopping cart, sat a box of prenatal vitamins. Sarah felt her knees weaken. She abandoned her own cart and rushed toward the exit, but Jennifer's voice caught her like a fishhook. Sarah. Oh my God. Sarah. Wait. She turned. Jennifer's face was flushed, embarrassed but also triumphant in a way that made Sarah's stomach turn. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way, Jennifer said, her hand moving unconsciously to her flat stomach. We weren't planning. It just happened. We're about 8 weeks along. Marcus at least had the decency to look ashamed, but he didn't say anything. He just stood there, the man who'd called her broken, now starting fresh with someone whose body worked the way nature intended. Sarah drove home with tears blurring her vision, nearly running a red light. Inside her apartment, she collapsed on the bare floor where the couch used to be and screamed into her hands until her throat was raw. That night, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Sarah? This is Maria. From the diner. Reaper gave me your number. Hope that's okay. We heard what happened at the grocery store. Small town, word travels. Get dressed. We're coming to get you. 20 minutes later, the rumble of motorcycles shook Sarah's apartment windows. She peered through the blinds and saw them lined up on the street. 5 Harleys gleaming under the streetlights, their riders waiting with impatience that felt almost ceremonial. Maria stood at her door, helmet under her arm, wearing a leather jacket that had seen 1,000 miles. You don't have to talk. You don't have to explain. You just have to trust us for one night. Sarah hadn't trusted anyone in weeks, but something about Maria's eyes, dark and knowing, like she'd walked through her own fire and survived, made her grab her jacket. The ride took them out of Bakersfield, into the desert hills where the city lights faded behind them and the stars opened up like diamonds scattered across black velvet. The wind whipped Sarah's hair, and for the first time since Marcus left, she felt something other than pain. She felt alive. They pulled into a compound, a sprawling property with a main clubhouse, garage bays, and a bonfire already burning in a pit surrounded by dozens of people. This was the Hells Angels clubhouse, and Sarah's heart hammered with uncertainty. But then she saw the faces, women with their arms around each other, children running between the bikes, old men with gray beards sharing stories over beer. This wasn't the dangerous gang she'd imagined. This was a family. Reaper met her as she climbed off Maria's bike. Welcome home, kid. Over the next hours, Sarah heard their stories. Tiny had lost his daughter to leukemia and now volunteered at children's hospitals every weekend. Maria had escaped an abusive marriage with nothing but the clothes on her back, and the club had given her protection, purpose, a reason to keep breathing. Jax was raising his little sister alone after their parents died in a car crash. Every single person here had been broken by life in some way, and every single one had found family not through blood, but through choice. Reaper pulled Sarah aside as the fire crackled. "We've been talking and we want to make you an offer. We want you to be our club godmother." Sarah blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means your family. It means when you hurt, we hurt. When someone disrespects you, they disrespect all of us. It means you'll never be alone again. Not unless you choose to be." Tears streamed down Sarah's face, but this time they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of recognition, of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in months. If you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible, ever felt like you didn't matter, stay with us. Because Sarah's story is just beginning, and what happens next will restore your faith in humanity. Hit that subscribe button, you won't want to miss what comes next. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it happened. Sarah started spending weekends at the clubhouse, helping organize charity rides for foster children and teaching art classes to the kids who gathered there. The club members called her Sister Sarah, and when she walked into a room, she was greeted with hugs that felt like armor against the world's cruelty. 3 months after becoming godmother, Sarah walked into a parent-teacher conference at Roosevelt Middle School and found Marcus sitting across from her. His face went pale. Jennifer was 7 months pregnant now, and apparently they were enrolling his stepson-to-be in Sarah's school district. "Sarah," he started, his voice tight with discomfort. "I didn't know you'd be here." Before she could respond, the door opened and Reaper walked in, followed by Maria. They'd insisted on coming as her family, wearing their cleanest jeans and leather vests, their presence filling the small conference room like thunderclouds. "We're here to support Ms. Mitchell," Reaper said calmly, settling into a chair beside her. "She's family." Marcus's face went from pale to red. "This is inappropriate. This is a school function." The principal, Mrs. Chun, who'd been watching the exchange with interest, smiled slightly. "Actually, Mr. Mitchell, Ms. Mitchell is entitled to bring whomever she chooses to support her. Now, shall we discuss your concerns about the curriculum?" The meeting was brief, but the message was clear. Sarah was no longer the abandoned, broken woman Marcus had left behind. She was protected, valued, surrounded by people who would walk through fire for her. The real turning point came in June, when the school held its annual art show. Sarah's students had created a massive collaborative mural titled "Family is What You Make It," featuring painted handprints from every child in the program, surrounded by images of diverse families, single parents, adoptive families, blended families, chosen families. At the center, in bold letters, was a quote Sarah had written. "You are not defined by what your body can or cannot do. You are defined by the love you give and the lives you touch." The entire Hell's Angels chapter showed up for the opening, their motorcycles lined up outside the school like a protective wall. Parents who'd whispered about Sarah now watched in silence as these leather-clad bikers gently praised children's artwork, bought refreshments to support the program, and stood beside Sarah like she was royalty. Marcus attended with Jennifer, her belly round and prominent. Sarah saw them standing in front of the mural, reading the quote. Jennifer's eyes met Sarah's across the room, and for the first time, Sarah saw something that looked like respect. But it was Reaper's words that night, as they celebrated at the clubhouse, that changed everything. "Sarah, we want to help you start something bigger. A foundation for women who've been told they're not enough." The Enough Foundation launched on a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after Marcus had walked out. The building was modest, a renovated warehouse in downtown Bakersfield, but inside, it was a sanctuary. Art therapy rooms, support groups, legal aid services, and a community kitchen where women could gather, share meals, and remember they weren't alone. Sarah stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, surrounded by the Hell's Angels chapter, local press, and dozens of women who'd already found refuge in what they were building. The foundation served women dealing with infertility, divorce, domestic violence, and any form of abandonment or trauma that made them feel less than whole. Maria had become the operations director. Tiny ran the security and maintenance. Jax organized fundraising rides that brought in tens of thousands of dollars. And Reaper, the man who'd first seen Sarah crying in a diner booth, served as the foundation's board chairman. The local news covered the opening, and the story went viral. A middle school teacher abandoned for infertility finds family with Hell's Angels. Starts foundation to help women reclaim their worth. Within weeks, donations poured in from across the country. Women shared their own stories of being called broken, disposable, not enough. Sarah's inbox flooded with messages. You saved my life. I thought I was alone. Thank you for showing me I matter. The foundation's first major success came when they helped a woman named Patricia escape an abusive marriage, get custody of her 3 children, and start a small bakery business with a microloan program Sarah had established. Patricia's ex-husband had told her she was worthless, that no one would ever want her. Now she employed 5 other women from the foundation, and her bakery had a 6-month waiting list. On a rainy November evening, almost identical to the night Sarah had first stumbled into the Rusty Anchor, she returned to the diner with the entire club. Betty was still working, still pouring coffee with those same kind eyes. I knew you'd be okay, Betty said, embracing Sarah tightly. I knew the moment I saw you that you had Survivor written all over you. As they sat in the same corner booth where everything had changed, Sarah's phone buzzed. It was an email from Marcus. She almost deleted it, but curiosity won. The message was short. I saw the news about your foundation. I was wrong about you, Sarah. I was wrong about everything. What you've built is incredible. I'm sorry doesn't cover it, but I'm sorry anyway. You were never broken. Sarah read it twice, then set her phone down. She didn't feel anger or vindication or even satisfaction. She felt peace. Marcus's opinion no longer mattered. His validation was irrelevant. She'd built a life that didn't need his approval to be meaningful. Reaper raised his beer. To Sarah Mitchell, the strongest woman I know. The club echoed the toast, their voices filling the diner with warmth and belonging. 3 years later, Sarah stood on the stage of the California Women's Leadership Conference in San Francisco, looking out at 2,000 faces. The Enough Foundation now had chapters in 12 states, had helped over 5,000 women rebuild their lives, and had partnered with hospitals to provide free counseling for families dealing with infertility and loss. But that wasn't why she was there. Sarah had been invited to speak because last month, she'd done something that surprised everyone, including herself. She'd adopted 2 siblings from foster care, Maya, age 9, and Connor, age 6, children who'd been passed over by countless families because they came as a package deal, because they had trauma histories, because they weren't the perfect blank slate most adoptive parents wanted. Standing backstage with her before the speech were Reaper and Maria, who'd become Maya and Connor's honorary grandparents. The kids called the entire Hell's Angels chapter their aunts and uncles, and they'd never known a moment without fierce, protective love surrounding them. Sarah began her speech with the story of that rainy November night, of the diner, of the words that had nearly destroyed her. No kids means no future. Then she told them about the family she'd found, the foundation she'd built, and the 2 children sleeping peacefully in their hotel room upstairs who called her mom. I spent so long thinking I was broken because my body couldn't do what society said it should do, Sarah said, her voice steady and strong. But family isn't about biology. Worth isn't about function. And future isn't something you create by checking boxes on someone else's list. Future is built every single day through love, through showing up, through choosing to matter. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Backstage afterward, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Betty at the Rusty Anchor. Saw you on the news, honey. Proud doesn't even cover it. Come by when you're back in town. Coffee's on me. That evening, Sarah returned to her home in Bakersfield, a beautiful house she'd bought with money from her book deal about the foundation's first year. Maya and Connor ran to greet her, their laughter filling rooms that had once echoed with loneliness. As she tucked them into bed, Connor looked up at her with serious eyes. Mom, my friend at school said you're not our real mom because you didn't give birth to us. Sarah smiled and kissed his forehead. Real isn't about how a family starts. Real is about who shows up every day, who loves you when things are hard, who chooses you again and again. And I choose you both every single day, forever. Maya, already half asleep, mumbled, we choose you too, Mom. Thank you for watching this story all the way to the end. If it touched your heart, Please hit that like button and leave a comment telling us what family means to you. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about real people overcoming impossible odds. And remember, you are enough exactly as you are. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning.